Okay, for those of the present in the room, this is Shane Shroeder. He will be giving a talk on the insider threat. Yay.
Actually, I don't know that. I don't know what I would do. Yeah, we're good. Okay,
we're good. All right. So my name is Shane Shroeder. I work at MITRE. I've been there quite a while. I really like it. That's kind of my introduction because that's not what's really important. I was sitting at the Bruce's panel on Friday night, the Hackers vs. Academics panel, and there was a complaint that there was no new research. And I'm thinking, my slides have already been public released. I can't change them. But to me, I'm not really presenting on anything new. It's just something that, to me, hasn't really been presented on before. Anytime there's a major incident, all of a sudden everyone's red team talk has insider threat labeled in it. Everyone's new forensics has insider threat labels in it in their talk, but they never really say how their research impacts the problem. So this is more kind of like an educational brief than anything super technical. So we'll go over what my view of an insider is from the work I do. Aspects of an insider threat program, common data sources, how do you validate a program you've set up, and then a summary of program best practices. So what is the insider threat as I view it? This is a definition that we took from CMU CERT. It's a current or former employee or contractor, someone that has already internal access to your corporate network and stuff like that, that has authorized access. They intentionally exceed or misuse that access that negatively affects the CIA of the information systems. We're not talking about necessarily in this talk insiders that are using Metasploit on your internal network. We're talking people that use their access you've already given them, but for malicious purposes. But there's no really overt rule breaking. So we've kind of broken it up through motivation. You have authorized users doing authorized actions, authorized users doing unauthorized actions, and then people will claim that once the APT gets on your network, they'll look like insiders. That kind of falls into the unauthorized users, authorized actions, and unauthorized users, unauthorized actions. I spend most of my time thinking about the problem with authorized users and authorized actions. It's not your typical user, or it's the authorized user and unauthorized actions. Those are the sysadmins that are breaking passwords or hacking into systems on your network. The authorized users or unauthorized actions are literally 50-year-old grandfathers that barely know how to use Microsoft Office, but they can use their Intel app and save stuff to a floppy, right, and pass it to people. So it's people that are using their everyday accesses and everyday job functions to steal information. And they do it for a variety of reasons, as seen on the right. We have a whole bunch of different insider threat types, from common misuse to network tampering, all the way down the line to espionage. Some of the hard stuff is Anna Montez, who she would view documents, memorize them, take them home, and then send them over encrypted radio comms. That's kind of the hard end of the spectrum. How do you catch someone who is spying for Cuba and is the lead Cuban analyst for DIA, right? She's looking at Cuban documents all day, memorizing them, and then taking them home and transmitting them over radio frequencies. From a security perspective, she's not doing anything while she's breaking your corporation's security policy. She's not breaking any security controls, right? Yes, sir.
If you go back for a sec, it says log incidents. So this is a graph of how many times their activity was logged. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So Bradley Manning downloaded a whole bunch of documents, generated a whole bunch of logs. Well, if they were logging properly, would have generated a whole bunch of logs, and was caught fairly quickly, partially due to his own, OPSEC, but as you go down, you see these people who do one or two things every, maybe three things every 6 months to a year and a half. The first two we're doing, everything in a week, right? So it's kind of a logs or incidents per overtime. I have another slide. Hansen and Montez operated for years before they were caught, and both of them were caught because of human tips, not anything they necessarily did wrong. Various models of an insider threat program and aspects map to kind of the organization within your company that would handle this. So, policy and personnel review, that's kind of handled by your SSO type shops, your lawyer, stuff like that. The pink ones are, prevention, collection, analysis, attribution, incident response. That's your C&D shop. The model we've seen used that is probably the most productive is to have your insider threat team sitting with your cyber analysts, whatever you'd like to call them, within your C&D shop. That way, if you see something that is more the malicious type use, you're not necessarily sure if it's persistent threat or if it's actually insider. So we've seen cases where we initially thought it was one, it turned out to be the other. So it's much easier to throw that over the wall within your own shop than have to, start up a new case somewhere else. Understanding that there's not always an LECI type function within an organization is sometimes handled by another organization, but those are really the people that will give you your authority and your threat awareness and threat information, and that will actually run the investigation, right? Because you don't necessarily want your C&D analyst testifying. So people who are running the investigation will usually have to do the court stuff. And if you can hide some of the geeks behind the wall in the C&D shop, they don't necessarily have to testify. Going over that, not all organizations will have all aspects, but the most successful programs will try and develop at least a portion of each one. These are various policies and authorities that if you're going to try and bring criminal action against insiders within your organization that you need to be aware of. I've left off a lot of the computer fraud and misuse. This is kind of the stuff that, since we're in DC, you've seen a lot. 793, 794, and 798, those are a lot of the mishandling of classified and espionage statutes. Hansen, if you go and look at his indictment, which you can freely pull off DOJ's website, you'll see that he had a bunch of 794 indictments against him. Thomas Drake, the leak from NSA, had a whole bunch of 793. It's very hard to prove espionage. There's 4 factors you have to prove in order to actually get an espionage conviction, which is that they knowingly and intently is 1, transfer national security defensive information, which is 2, an agent of a foreign power, which is 3, and the last one is to harm the United States or to empower that foreign power. A lot of times, one of those aspects is missing. If any one of them is missing, you won't get the espionage statute. So they'll, lump on, 10 or 13 ones of mishandling classified, because a lot of times people will store classified at their home, which is much easier to get them on than trying to get a full espionage conviction. 1995 Intelligence Authorization Act said that the FBI is responsible for all 811 cases, any espionage case that is non-DOD. There's a few caveats. How do you handle, active military versus retired and stuff like that? But for the most part, in generalities, the FBI has all civilian espionage cases. And then for military, the corresponding branch. So if it's an Air Force espionage case, AFOSI would be the responsible party. National Defense Authorization Act required DOD to require insider threat mitigations for DOD systems, and then the executive order is one for protecting classified information and stuff like that, which required government agencies that handle classified to come up with some way to handle the insider threat. Second thing about policies and authorities is it's really important to have these type of things reviewed by lawyers. If you don't have them, your employees expect a level of privacy if these aren't there. If you tell them not to expect a level of privacy and you tell them that you're going to be monitoring, you're able to do that. If you don't tell them that you're monitoring, they have an expectation of privacy. So it's really important to have those things checked by lawyers. The more, as you step up your monitoring, you need to make that known to your users. So, if you're monitoring web usage, your banner is going to look different than if you're capturing keystrokes. And to have those checked by lawyers is pretty important. Who and which group at your organization can log differs depending on where you are. People get really funny about Title 18 and monitoring U.S. persons. So a lot of times C&D shops will be the one place where all the logs are collected. And then privacy impact assessments are always important because you want to store information about your users in order to do more advanced analytics. Saying someone printed 80 documents is what you're going to find is someone whose job is print documents that are 80 pages long, such as HR personnel. But if you can say, show me everyone who's printed 80 pages that's not in HR and is not from country X, that's much more useful. We do a lot of reading of indictments from DOJ and other sources. A lot of times you'll see things in there that people have done. Anna Montez used encrypted communication. Hansen did a bunch of self-searches. So, you're in your intelligence application, you're searching for yourself. There's a couple good reasons why you may be doing that. You're looking for all the intelligence products that you've produced, or you're looking for intelligence products that are about you. He also did some password cracking and had multiple OPR incidents. Terry Childs, the admin from California who basically locked down the network, did some network tampering, and he would avoid audit checks about himself. And then Bradley Manning, significant amounts of data downloaded and then removable media usage. The policy was not to use removable media, but if you're not enforcing it, is it really a policy? Granted, forward operating bases in theater, it's going to be sometimes difficult to enforce those policies. That's why now they're paying a whole bunch of people. How do we enforce policies and not impact mission? That's still an answer people don't have. That's still a question people don't have a good answer for. Insider threat is always married with the auditing program. It's really important to log these things. If you are having a hard time keeping firewall data for 7 days, how do you expect to keep intelligence application view audit data for 50 years? Because that's the level of, there's no statute of limitations on espionage. So people are literally talking about keeping application logs for the life of the employee and then 25 years afterwards. How are you going to do that if you can't keep your firewall data for, now we're not talking about keeping firewall data for 50 years, but something like your high value targets, the applications that have your important data in them, how are you going to audit that? Not only are we talking about keeping it, we're talking about making that audit data useful. If I have to go to another application, the way we had it set up was in order to get past CNA, you had to give us your user activity monitoring. We're not talking about firewall logs and that. Person A searched for this search term at this time, viewed this document. If I go to another developer and they hand me Oracle debug logs that say service DB user inserted this row or updated this row, I'm going to stab someone. It's not useful. What we're trying to do is model intent. And that's something that's been stagnant, right? They're trying to come out with standards on sharing audit data within different communities. and it's just the bare minimum, right? They want you to be able to show me audit data. This person searched this. This person viewed this. That's the absolute bare minimum. How do you model intent, right? So if this person views this document for 20 minutes, is it because they're a slow reader, or is it because they're trying to memorize something? How do you model that in audit log data? It's not sexy work, right? We talk about offense being sexy. We talk about defense being sexy. Logging is like the least sexiest thing in the industry. I mean, no one wants to work on it. The biggest thing now is we see a bunch of open source projects that are trying to, group audit data together. Well, if you're taking a small pile of, crap and adding it to another small pile of crap, all you're getting is a bigger pile of crap. There's no one working on trying to make logs that represent how users interact with systems. There's some behavioral scientists that are working on it, but they're not coming to these types of conferences. Hopefully this talk will try and get people in this community who are interested in this problem to think about it and present on it, because it's just not happening right now.
Aren't there some tools that do like behavioral anomaly detection, like file access, like that?
There are, but they all depend on the they're not generating the logs, right? They're doing anomaly detection on the actual logs. So if the logs aren't good at presenting how users interact in the system, you're coming up with anomalies that aren't necessarily representative of how users interact with the system.
What you're saying is the data points don't correlate to what they're looking for.
Correct. And a lot of commercial companies are coming out with these anomaly detections. I think the open source world could destroy them, but there's no good data set to train. I mean, everyone, even the commercial companies, are using the Enron data set. It's because that's what's available. It's not a good representation of a company, right? Most of that data set is email traffic from high-level executives during a period where their company is going down the toilet. It's not a good representation. So of course you're going to find a whole bunch of people that have spikes in mood because they're losing everything they have. But that's what everyone's trading on. So they say, oh, we have a 90% detection rate. When you put it in an actual enterprise, it drops to like 10%. And I don't know how you build a good representation of enterprise data unless, I don't know. DARPA is doing a bunch of work with their Atoms work, anomaly detection on multiple scales, which is taking data from multiple networks and multiple data types and trying to find anomalies. They got a bunch of big thinkers from, I believe, IBM, entity resolution type stuff, working on it. Are they going to release that data set? I doubt it, because they're probably getting it from someplace that's not going to be willing to do that. So how do we generate data that people in the open source community can actually work on? Common data sources that are collected in the enterprise, perimeter firewall, IDS logs, web proxy logs, those are going to be useful if you're looking for traditional persistent threat type activity. It's not so useful when you're looking for how people interact with your systems. Same goes with syslog, event logs. Host-based monitoring, they have some modules that work. Problem is you got to turn all the modules to get them on to work, and at that point, once you turn on all the modules, the entire system kind of is unuseful. So the real question is, how do you do audit and logging without impacting the user? Because anytime you turn on new audit data, if it impacts the user, the first thing is you're turning it off. Data loss prevention, network-based, host-based. I prefer host-based because you get it raw at the host. Network-based, you start to deal with encrypted comms and stuff like that. Application logs, find this very useful as long as those application logs are modeling user activity. What are people searching for? How long are they, what did they view? What did that search list? So if they're not viewing any documents, but they're searching for something and then viewing 10 pages worth of results, you can get a lot of information from just the file name and then the 2 sentences that appear from the Google search log, right? So that kind of stuff, are they going through 10 pages of search results and then just exiting out and never viewing any documents? That might be suspicious. Then you have physical security that you want to mix in, badge logs, personnel information, travel. Another important research topic that isn't getting a lot of traction is, for years now, the counterintelligence community, financial information, travel information, personnel information, that's what they live in. That's what they've lived and died by. But it's still in an analog world, right? It's still self-reporting. How do we come up with a digital way to monitor this stuff so we're not relying on self-reporting? Pretty soon, everyone, after the baby boomers retire, most high school kids, college kids have social networking accounts. They're going to be in the workforce. Can we monitor that? Is that allowed under, does that become U.S. persons monitoring? These are all questions that aren't being answered. Is it technically possible to monitor? Yes. Are we going to be allowed to? Not sure. But we have to do something, because right now, in this space, when you apply for a security clearance, you have one big, investigation you have to go through at the, beginning. That's like going through CNA for a system. Then you're reinvestigated every 5 years. Imagine if you put a production system, goes through CNA, and then you don't patch it or scan it for 5 more years after that. That's what we're essentially doing with our personnel. Privileged user monitoring. This is kind of new. There's a couple commercial companies that are doing it. It's essentially an enterprise commercial rootkit. It's got backend servers. You can do push down policy, but it's essentially a commercial rootkit. It'll log copy and paste, file transfers to removable media network. One of the features it has for prevention is encrypt all documents going to removable media. The only way you can view those documents that have been encrypted is if you have an agent on the machine, right? So theoretically, you're only allowed to view that stuff in the enterprise. If it leaves, it's encrypted. Implementing that policy, really hard, because how do I send it to a business partner, right? They're not going to necessarily have an agent on the machine. So they enable, okay, well, we can give it a password. Well, if I'm an insider and I'm encrypting it and I have the password, all of a sudden it's no longer protected, right? Because you've just killed the entire thing. Oh, I'm all done. All right. I don't have too much time left. Silent hit example, this is something I was talking about, improving logs. Someone searches, they don't have access. Since 9/11, it's been a need to share. Before it was a need to know. This is kind of like a need to verify. If I'm searching and I don't have permission to view that data, I get 0 hit results. But the people who own that data are seeing that someone's searching it. So they can verify that my clearances are there in order to access it. Entity resolution, this is really important. How do you store, well, I guess I'm done. So long-term storage analysis. I'll make these slides available, or afterwards we can go over them. I apologize. I should have had my talk longer. Sorry, guys.